Hi, this is Michael Waitze, and welcome back to Thailand GameChanger. We are focused on the driving forces behind the startup ecosystem in Thailand and Southeast Asia, produced by True Digital Park, this amazing building where we are, in conjunction with Michael Waitze Media. We have the most informative and insightful conversations with startup founders, venture capitalists, ecosystem builders, and senior leaders from tech giants and the government, all recorded here in this amazing studio in True Digital Park. I'm joined today by Peter Macquart-Moulin, CEO and founder of YesMom. Peter, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's been a while.
I think it's been a couple of years since we last had a chat.
I'm glad you're still here. It's good to see you. So for context, can you give our audience a little bit of your background and experience?
Yeah. So my background, I'm French American. I grew up mostly in France.
You grew up mostly in France?
I grew up mostly in France.
So that means I completely butchered the pronunciation of your name.
It's Peter or Macquart-Moulin or Macquart-Moulin. It's either works. Yeah, I'm used to hearing both.
Awesome.
So I did. My first career was in strategic risk consulting, focused on the defense sector.
In France?
First in Greater China and Mongolia.
Oh, wow.
And then out of Shanghai. And then out of London, it was global industry focused on the defense sector.
Got it.
So looking at power mapping and different strategic market entry for defense companies around the world, managing issues particularly. So I had a focus expertise in corruption, anti-corruption rather. And I think after 10 years, it just felt like I needed to do something fresh, and
that wasn't fresh enough.
And it was very exciting, and it's a wonderful company that I worked for. But it just felt like that was the time. I was about 32, and it was just that point in my career where I had to make a choice, and an MBA felt like a nice way to take a break.
So you went and got an MBA?
So I did an MBA in Madrid at IE Business School.
Are you a Spanish speaker as well?
Not at all, but it's an English speaking program. It was one of the top 10 ranked at the time in FT rankings. And the school has a really strong focus on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And that's where I got the first taste and got infected with the entrepreneurship bug.
Did you say affected or infected?
Infected. And kind of been chasing that dragon ever since, and that was about 5-6 years ago already. So I started a company, my first company out of the MBA, made the typical MBA startup mistakes, but learned a lot in the process.
What was the vertical you were working in?
It was crafting. So e-learning focused on crafting in the women's space. A lot of DIY videos, particularly knitting, sewing, and the like.
Interesting.
And we finally got it to work, but by then it was too late. So the lessons we learned came a little too late.
What year was that?
So that was 2015, 2016.
It's not that long ago.
So not that long ago, no.
Right.
So YesMom is my second venture.
What brings you to Asia?
So I was living in Shanghai about 10 years ago, and I always really was attracted to Southeast Asia.
Okay.
During my MBA program, actually, I came out to the region, to Singapore, to Kuala Lumpur, met a number of VCs, and people doing like Nova Founders and Golden Gate Ventures, and all those guys are very nice to take the time and let us know what's happening in this ecosystem. And Thailand just felt like a good place as a landing point.
Okay.
I gave myself 3 months with my wife. We just got married and came straight here.
We all do this.
And and I met Gear, and then met Gear and Jace and Stein at Centaur Nakama, and Sarah Huang at the time was there as well. And that was it.
What was your focus on sort of the women's space originally with the knitting and that stuff? And then what was the move to women's health? What was the idea there?
So women's health, it was perhaps accidental and partly pursuing something that I was passionate about. Gear and Jace hired me as an entrepreneur in residence to look at something in the parenting space. And it was really quite agnostic whether what that would be. And after really, what was great about Santora is it really gave you the space to, as Gear had said, to be creative, to be innovative, and take time to really research and be data driven in the direction that we went. And after literally conducting hundreds of interviews with women, and mostly, as well as doctors and other stakeholders, it shifted for me away from parenting to what I saw as the biggest problem was about women's health. What women were most interested about and most affected was knowing, or lack thereof, of knowing their own bodies and sexual and reproductive health, and the taboos that are associated with that in Thailand, but I see that that's also true in Europe or the United States and across the region. So it's not just a Thai problem. And we saw that medicine in some ways is patriarchal, where doctors
a little bit
were just telling women what to do without really giving them the time to understand what their options were and weigh the pros and cons of these things. And to be fair to doctors, they would tell me that we don't have time to educate a woman about her body, and we have about 10 minutes, if that, in a consultation.
Yeah. So my feeling on this, excuse me for the little bit of a stutter, but my feeling on this is that that's their problem, not the patient's problem. And I always wonder why there are not more sort of female OBGYNs, right? In the sense that how can you, it's like a ski instructor who's never skied before.
Right.
I can tell you to balance and edge and all these other things, but if I've never done it, it feels like it's hard to do that 100%.
Sure. I think that's part of the problem. I think it's the access is somewhat limited, and particularly in this region where the ratio of doctors to patients is quite low.
Right.
So the opportunity to meet or to see a doctor and have that conversation, but also what we saw mostly women didn't have the tools to have a meaningful conversation.
Right.
And that's what YesMom was about. We felt that we could empower women with the tools to have a more meaningful conversation with her doctor, with her OBGYN, and not just seek advice online or from grandparents who had maybe or parents who had somewhat outdated
less information
notions,
and less experience.
Exactly.
Before we get into sort of the technical parts of your build out in your company, I want to talk a little bit more about the taboos that you mentioned. Can you just focus on that for a couple of minutes? Like, what do you mean? And do you think that they're different in Southeast Asia at large than they are in the West?
I mean, I think now my experience is more in this region than it is in the West. Fair enough. It's a little more anecdotal and less research for what it is in Europe.
Right.
But I think just generally talking about sex, talking about
reproduction.
I mean, reproduction. I've my experience with doctors, some doctors in this region, OBGYNs kind of blush at these conversations.
Right, and that's their job. That's their full-time job.
And there's wonderful doctors here, and that's not to disparage the profession, but we so I think there was a lot of taboos just about talking about these things.
Got it.
It's partly there's taboo about talking about it with your partner.
Right.
Men in particular don't like talking about it. They get very tend to feel very threatened, and questioning their fertility, what maybe they have are subfertile, or have an issue, kind of challenges their perception of their virility and their masculinity,
right? Which has nothing to do with anything.
Has nothing to do with anything,
right?
But that's it. And also, there's a lot of misinformation. So we noticed a lot of women trying to conceive while on hormonal birth control, and you can understand at first it's you giggle, but a lot of women actually have difficulty menstruating regularly, so they have conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome.
So they take the
birth control pill to regulate
their
menstruation without certainly without realizing that is birth control. So these sorts of things.
That's really interesting, actually.
We also had we've seen a lot of cases of where women are told that it is quite normal for some women to experience painful intercourse or have painful menstruations.
Right.
And it's just, hey, some women have that unfortunate luck of the draw. And what we were able to tell them, and actually there's something called endometriosis. Maybe you want to talk to your doctor about that. And it's something that you can actually mitigate again. So really it was about challenging, informing women about their sexual and reproductive health, and also challenging some of these misconceptions that they might have had.
So talk to me about how YesMom works, and then I want to go through the business building part of this.
So, I mean, it was, and it is, it started off as an application, a mobile application.
Right.
And really what we wanted to deliver is personalized health insights. Our mission is to make sexual reproductive health information more accessible to women. In order to do that, we needed to understand more of the symptoms and lifestyle behaviors that they have in medication. So we created an application, a menstrual tracker, and there's quite a few out there nowadays. And really the basis of this was to add a little more pedagogy, have a lot more content, and make it much more engaging. So, it was quite successful when we launched. We didn't know if anybody would download it or if they would actually be telling us their symptoms. Luckily, in the first month, we had about 70,000 downloads in Thailand.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was great. It took off. We had a good start. And about half the users were regularly adding symptoms and lifestyle data. So telling us about their basal body temperature, if they experience pain during intercourse, the texture and color of their menstruation, and all of this data fed into our data bank, and we were then able to give them very personalized information on what these symptoms mean, and in the process educate them about their health and sexual well-being.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
really awesome. And how many downloads have you had in total?
So, I mean, we've gone through some deaths at YesMom.
I know. Let's talk.
So we're going to
talk about that in a second.
So it's still quite low. So we had an initial spike, and then we really weren't focusing on growth. We were trying to focus on a business model, as you alluded to.
Yep.
And today, so it's a still relatively small number compared to other apps out there. We have about 5,000 daily users.
Okay.
So it's enough. We have loyal users, which is great. And once we kind of nail down the monetization, we'll be able to grow that out as well.
So you mentioned this, but we talked about this offline, right?
Yeah.
I know that building this business has gone through a few iterations, near deaths.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're still here, as we said offline as well.
Me too.
But can you take us through some of the struggles that you've had? Because I think this is something that entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, ecosystem builders don't talk about enough.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to go there. I want to figure out what happened.
Well, I think some of the, I think first of all, we wouldn't be here. YesMom wouldn't exist if it wasn't for, Gear and Jason and Centaur Nakama. And I think that space and support and funding that we had was incredible. But it also brought challenges later when we went out to fundraise. I think the model, the startup studio model, was very difficult to explain to VCs when they looked at our cap table.
Right.
And it was
who really owns this thing?
Who really owns it? Who's going to still be running it later?
Right. What's your vested interest, kind of?
Exactly. Yeah. If things go upside down, are the founders going to stick around and be properly incentivized? But I think that was only one of the issues, and we eventually overcame it. Actually, after your advice, I was able to make the case for restructuring the company, and that was only one aspect. I think part of it was we needed money very quickly, so I think we had to go out and raise too quickly, rather than have the time to really build a business behind these exciting, promising numbers, if you will.
Right.
And we went through a few kind of pivots on that front where we were going with insurance companies. We were talking about 3 insurance companies that were really keen.
I remember.
And we had one big pharma company here that was the most promising. That was really a learning experience of being an early stage startup and negotiating with a $1 billion company at a very high level, and realizing there's just the sort of incentives long term are a little bit different.
Well, there's just this massive mismatch, but also a massive mismatch in leverage.
In leverage, absolutely.
Right.
I think that was the key
That's the
thing.
key,
I think part of it was a problem of leverage. Part of it was, trying to explain. So, company wants to buy into innovation, and I think that was remarkable. But then, how do they take this in house without killing that innovation? And in fact,
that's what normally happens.
Helping it to grow, right?
Right.
We went through a period of time where it was, a significant amount of seed capital for Thailand. I think this would have been quite a large, probably one of the largest seed investments in Thailand. And then, those talks went into possible acquisition. But meanwhile, this is 6 months of me being away from the business and dealing with VCs being in a exclusivity tie-up. And once that didn't come to fruition,
right?
We'd really extended past our.
Well, now you're stuck,
runway,
right?
so.
Now you're stuck.
And then we're stuck. So then at that point, we had still a distorted cap table distorted, if you will, depends on your perspective, but a cap table that favored a startup studio. We had debt at that time, and we had 15 employees in a very robust monthly burn. So it was a challenge then to and I think a lot of the interested investors before. They saw that this deal didn't go through, and that's all of a sudden people who are really interested are a little less keen, and they get spooked. So.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like if nobody asks you out on a date, then nobody wants to date you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if everybody thinks you've never been on a date before, why do I want to be the first one? Kind of question, which is good and bad.
But I mean,
anyway.
this is our.
But you survived.
This was our experience, but it wasn't fundamentally why it died. I think if we had. If we had spent more time on the business rather than kind of the user numbers, that would have given us a little more leverage to, whether it's with this pharma company or other VCs. And that was the biggest.
But do you think that wasn't a symptom back then? Because this was a few years ago, right?
Yeah,
there was a symptom back then of what you were meant to do. That's what you were told to do.
Yeah,
and they were.
we had to go out and raise right away. That was it. That's the job of a founder, is go raise, and it's terrible.
I will say there were dissenting voices to that growth.
No, of course,
all costs growth thing.
Yeah. We just had to grow numbers and let's get 1 million users. Great. We'll worry about
how we make money.
Make money later, and that's maybe that works in the U.S. In other markets, does not work in Thailand.
I mean, look at WeWork, right? Not anymore.
Exactly. It doesn't work.
People have to make money.
Yeah.
You got to have some road to profitability, I think.
Yeah.
And you're doing that now, at least, right?
We're doing that now. So we went through another. So we didn't completely die. I mean, I was still there. I was the only one. And Nathima Ducro was still working with me at the time. The two of us were trying to bring it back to life. Robert Lumitz was advising us on a merger with another Thai health tech company.
Okay.
And that didn't work out. And I think. For the best for both parties, but we finally managed to find a model that made sense for our users without changing our mission. So our mission has stayed the same. The focus of the company has stayed the same, and so we haven't had to compromise our values. But we found where the consumer is willing to pay, and so we're really focused now on a B2C model.
Okay.
We'll deal. I think in the longer term, we want to work again with pharma companies, and but I understand how that's a long process, and we need to be a little bit more stable and strong before we do that again.
Right. So I was going to ask you, what is the long-term goal?
I mean, so right now the new product that we just launched in India. So we had also looked at other markets to see if we could scale outside of Thailand. I think part of the problem that we had is only being in Thai and in Thailand and not really being able to show yet. And I think that's a problem with a lot of Thai startups is you're not going to get the same valuation as an Indonesian company doing the same thing. And your story of going abroad is harder to believe when those companies with more money and higher valuations can come into Thailand just as easily.
Right.
So we've, I have my wife is Indian, and I'm a overseas citizen of India now.
Oh.
So it was a easy.
What's that? NRI?
It's no, the OCI now.
OCI. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're originally from India, it's a non-resident Indian, and if you're not,
so no, now it's everything is OCI. They've
OCI,
changed.
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So I do get confused looks at the immigration, but
which part of India are you really from?
Are you married into this? I'm like, yeah.
That's great.
So we've launched a new product in India that we want to bring to Thailand in a few months. So actually, what we saw, our first kind of model that we went with was, okay, well, a lot of our women are actually trying to get pregnant. That's why the YesMom fertility branding now.
Yep.
And a lot of clinics in Thailand, in particular, also in India, are very keen on getting leads. And we said, okay, we have a lot of women in our platform that are trying to get pregnant. We noticed that there's a large number after a year that are still trying.
Right.
So that technically makes them infertile or subfertile, and consulting with a doctor and fertility specialist is advised. So we started working that model with clinics, but it became very obvious to me that, well, actually, it's we're still about providing information about sexual and reproductive health, and actually about 95% of our users are not infertile. A lot of them tend to be young, and not necessarily trying to start a family right away.
Right.
And they want more information. And so we just wanted to extend what we already did with for hormonal testing. So in Thailand, we will be launching a home kit to test your fertility. You'll receive in the mail a kit to draw a blood sample on a dry blood sample swat, and send that to one of our partner labs, and that information is fed into our algorithm, our content database, and we provide the interpretation of what that means.
That's really interesting. So you're going to sell your own blood sampling.
Yeah,
and
so
blood
we're doing that in
kit.
India already.
That's really cool.
In India, we're doing a little bit different model. The costs of the kits are more expensive because the technology required to do the analysis is more. But in India, it's feasible to send a phlebotomist directly to someone's home. So we do a venous blood collection at home.
It's just so cool what's possible
and it's amazing. And we see the real advantage is providing the context. So women, when you look at a lab, or men, any kind of blood test from the lab, it's very hard to interpret. If maybe there's an issue or if you're above or below average. But what does that actually mean for your health, and particularly fertility? What does this mean for your choices? If you're a 25-year-old woman and you have high AMH levels or high thyroid levels, or what does this mean for your options now and later down the road? So this is just, it's really exciting for us because it's taking what we do in the app and that we love and really think it's impactful, and taking it a step further, in being able to tell women, things are fine, but here is some things to look out for. You could consider egg freezing down the road. You could consider getting checked out for PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, based on your hormonal levels. And it's what we try to say that it's, our content is the equivalent of spending hours with a panel of doctors that are really explaining to you what these options are for you. So we're now focused more on the proactive consumer rather than the kind of reactive one who is already suffering from infertility. And so many women tell us, I'm struggling now. If I'd known 5 years ago that egg freezing was an option, was a thing, or that I had these, that it would be harder for me to conceive naturally, I could have been much more proactive. So that's So we launched this a month ago in India, and it's great. So hopefully in Thailand in about 3 months.
Cannot wait to hear more about it. Let's talk in general terms a little bit now about kind of the tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
What do you think has changed in Thailand since you started building this, since you first arrived? And then on top of that, what do you think is the state or status of the tech startup ecosystem in Thailand? And feel free to say whatever you want. Yeah.
I think I've sort of been,
because you've been in it for a while.
I've been in it for a while, and I think but to be fair, I've spent the last year kind of under a rock after having been out so much, just really focusing on getting this right again. It's been great because
we've made a ton of progress.
I've not been fundraising. If you just look at the people advising YesMom now, it's a lot more skewed on doctors and endocrinologists
rather than
on the venture fundraising.
Good for you, by the way.
So it's great. It's been really good. But I feel a little less connected to the ecosystem.
That's okay.
I think what surprised me recently is I went to a few events and pitches. At WeWork, because we're based in WeWork.
Oh, which one?
In Southorn.
Okay, great.
So we were in the Launchpad, WeWork Launchpad, which was based in Southorn. Job was running it there, and he's now in this building. I was seeing the same founders pitching the same thing that I saw them pitch 3 years ago. And I think that I was a bit surprised that there isn't more fresh blood. And I think in other ecosystems, month on month, you're going to go out and see these pitches, and there's going to be so many different ideas, and so it still feels that it's very either I just don't know what's happening, or it just seems like it's really recycling. But I think the change I see when I talk to founders now than when I did 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
There's a much more maturity. And I think what's exciting is that this wave of entrepreneurs in the last 2-3 years will hopefully either succeed or fail, not just be zombies that just kind of drag on, but they'll and I hope if they do fail that they'll be able to start again and have those lessons under their belt. And I think the maturity that you're going to see in this kind of second wave of third time founders is going to be really exciting to see.
So I think the fact that you've been under a rock for a year, your words, and that you've made this much progress without being directly connected explicitly to the ecosystem says something about, and again, there are dissenting voices on this, what it means to be so embedded and such a deep part of this. In other words, what are you really trying to do? Are you trying to network? Are you trying to build something?
Right. I think for me, it was a distraction being connected to the ecosystem.
I don't think it's just you.
Very much geared towards fundraising, and I think that's a problem. I think we need more opportunities to be really about building
something sustainable.
Something sustainable.
Yeah, and the market's caught up to you on this, by the way.
Yeah.
I think, and not just locally, but globally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot less, and I think there should be, and I've said this for a while, but I think there's a lot less like, let's go to another pitching event, let's go to another startup party, let's do that, and moving more towards how can I actually build something that's going to be real?
Yeah.
Right? It's less sexy and more just like grinding it out.
So I spend more of my time with CEOs of traditional companies that aren't necessarily too aware of what's happening in innovation and tech, or endocrinologists. And our laboratory partners, and that's refreshing, actually.
Real people running real businesses,
exactly.
Something to aspire
exactly,
to. Okay. Well, look, the last thing I want to ask you is, how long have you been in Thailand again? 5 years?
4 years now.
4 years now?
Yeah.
So now that you look around at it, what do you think is going to change the game in Thailand? Like, do you think a lot of other people are going to go under a rock and just like start cranking stuff out? What do you think really needs to change?
I mean, I think it's hard to say. It's a tough question. I think, I have perhaps some gripes, but I think I love being here, and I foresee us being here for a number of years. And so there's something to that. But I think, I think the ecosystem, well, we do have a lot of, you have to cut this.
It's okay, go ahead.
The first thing that the challenge that we have is just being here as foreigners, and in dealing with BOI and these sorts of processes.
Yep. Visa statuses are difficult,
visa stuff. It's a real challenge for foreign talent to come here.
It's a slog.
We've been in a 6-month process with BOI, and they're great, but it takes the fact that the process takes so long, and we need to be creating the innovation in the country. It really puts brakes on moving fast and testing new things. So I think we need to.
One of the things we used to say in the stock market was stock markets don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
Any kind of market. Yeah. Real markets don't like uncertainty. And if you don't know what your visa status is, if you don't know you're going to get your BOI approval, if you don't know if you're going to be able to get funding, all these things, then you're sitting in a massively uncertain situation.
Yeah.
And even though you said you're not spending all your time fundraising, at
some
point
with
you have to think about it, right? And all this admin takes time away from what you really want to do is building something.
Yeah.
So if that process, and this is me talking, not you, right? But if that process of getting the license, getting the visa, hiring people was just smoother.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the uncertainty.
The amount of time that I and my new co-founder, who was also an alumni from Santora,
all right,
he was running a different venture, spending a lot of time, pitching to the local administration,
right?
And it takes a lot of time. So we're not pitching to VCs of late, but we're doing that for bureaucratic reasons.
And it feels like this is more fraught.
Yeah,
to me,
exactly.
And that's
part of the reason why we are focused on testing this in India first, because it was a lot easier to do that there.
I get it.
I think that's one of the issues. I think, like YesMom, another reason why we are testing in other markets is because this issue of only being in Thailand and proving the case that we can be a more regional or international business, that it's not just local. And I think we'll never get adequate funding and adequate valuations if we're just focused on this market. So, and I think other entrepreneurs that I speak to are now kind of more keenly aware of that.
Right. So let's just say that a lot of people that come, and this is the last thing we'll go over, but let's just say that a lot of people that come through this studio to talk about these things say the same thing.
Right.
And that point is, if you're not thinking outside the country from day one, whether it's regional or global, you're just not going to be big enough or significant enough for people to care.
Exactly. I think a lot of the advice we had from VCs 3-4 years ago was, you have to focus on one market first, win it, and then move. But the point is, to move, you need to raise real money at a real valuation, and neither of which you can do if you're only in Thailand, because you're already competing in these other markets with people that are better funded. They might have been later comers to the game, but they're able to raise more money, and it's easier for them to come to Thailand and compete with you on your home turf than it is to go out.
Okay, let's leave the audience with that.
Yeah,
Peter, I want to thank you.
Hey, thank you,
Peter Macquart-Moulin, CEO and founder of YesMom. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm very glad that I made it.
I really appreciate your time today.